A new milestone of the world's largest free trade agreement. Starting from June the 2nd, the RCEP, or Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, enters into force for the Philippines, marking a full implementation of the agreement for all 15 signatories. The RCEP was first proposed by the regional grouping of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, in 2011. It now also includes non-ASEAN countries, namely China, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, the pact will eventually eliminate up to 90% of the tariffs on trade between member states within 20 years. Now, as the world's largest free trade pact that covers some 30% of the world's population and GDP, what does it mean for the region, both economically and politically, that it enters into force for the last signatory state? Today, I'm pleased to be joined from Hangzhou, Eastern China, by Weiwen, Senior Fellow at the think tank Center for China and Globalization, and from Manila, the Philippines, by Herman Tiu Laurel, President of the Asia Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, a non-profit think tank. Gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Mr. Weiwen, let me go to you first. Help us understand the significance of this date. What does it mean for Philippines to be finally entering into force as a member of the pact? Because the trade pact already enters into force on January the 1st, 2022, after the minimum required 10 signature states ratified it.
Well, in the past year, we were looking obviously.
I think
Sorry,
the
this is a question for Mr. Weiwen, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, I think this is a very exciting point for RCEP, because the Philippines is the last member state ratifying the agreement. That means RCEP by now it's applicable to all the members and is performing in full swing. And I think that will be very good for the Philippines itself. And then in the China-Philippines trade is also good for facilitating, encouraging both ways trade. Over the past 2 years, China and the Philippines, they had enjoyed the good growth in the bilateral trade. Bilateral trade between the two countries increased by over 27% from 2020 to 2022, only 2 years. And the problem is China's exports to the Philippines certainly grew faster, and the Philippines export to China grew slower. And during the first 4 months of this year, China's export to the Philippines increased by 14% over a year ago, and the Philippines export to China fell by 20%. So I think the ratification of Philippines to RCEP will encourage Philippines exports to China first. And I hope that the bilateral trade between the two countries, which hit $88 billion, will break $100 billion barrier within a couple of years. And the Philippines export to China will increase more. And China's investment in the Philippines will increase more.
Mr. Herman Tiu Laurel, what is your take on the significance of the day, both for the Philippines, for China, and for the region as well?
Well, we have been looking enviously at the neighbors of ours in ASEAN who entered the RCEP very early, and we have seen the growth in their exports to China. As we have heard from our colleague, the Philippines has been suffering some reversals in our exports, and this is a very good opportunity for us to turn things around again. With the expected 3% growth in the exports of the Philippines over the next few years, with the RCEP now in operation in the Philippines.
Mr. Weiwen, in the first months after RCEP came into effect in 2020, export from China to RCEP members increased by 17.7% year-on-year to some 6 trillion yuan, or less than $0.1 trillion US dollars. And China's trade with RCEP increased by 8% year-on-year to 12 trillion yuan. And in the first quarter of this year, China's trade with RCEP reached 3 trillion. That's with exports increasing by 20%. Are these increased trade attributable to RCEP? Mr. He.
Oh, yes. And I think RCEP plays a crucial role in supporting the integration of the economy in East Asia, and also encourage the global free trade arrangement. A study showed that because of the RCEP, the East Asian economy will get a strong push. By 2025, the member countries will have an actual export growth of 10.4 percentage points, and outbound investment stock an extra growth of 2.6%, and the actual GDP growth by 1.8% above the baseline. So that's very good for East Asia economic development. And because RCEP member states account for almost 30% of all the GDP and world exports, is a strong support to world economic growth and to globalization.
Mr. Herman Tiu Laurel, how do you look at the potential of RCEP in bringing greater trade and thus greater economic growth for the member states? At this moment, 1 year after the trade pact enters into operation, how do you look at the impact so far? Do you see enterprises, for instance, export-import companies, utilizing this trade to its full extent yet?
Well, our business people, our entrepreneurs, our agricultural sector are all in expectant mode right now, because opening up the China market in particular and all the other markets in the biggest trade bloc of the world offers Filipinos exciting possibilities. But also for Filipino consumers, the reduction of tariff on consumer goods and so on is a very promising development for our consumers. Of course, also we are expecting investments with the offshoring of Chinese businesses to the Philippines. These are some of the expectations. But even our politicians, who are jingoistic and very chauvinist, nationalistic, are expecting a lot from the RCEP now, with the opening of these markets and investments.
Mr. He, a very interesting development on the parallel to RCEP. Just days ago, trade ministers from 14 countries under the US-led IPEF, or Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, concluded a supply chains negotiation, including what they call a crisis response network to so-called keep supply chains resilient and secure. How will the IPEF affect RCEP, if at all?
And it's very interesting that it seems that IPEF overlaps with RCEP, because the member states are almost the same, except an important exception to China, not within IPEF. And the exception of RCEP is India, it's not in RCEP. And the other member countries are almost the same, and plus United States. That's the important difference. And the purpose of RPEF is not to support integration in East Asia, but to split those countries from China in the name of security. So that's an important example of the geo-economic fragmentation. Is not good for RCEP. However, I just doubt whether IPEF or the recently agreed supply chain the agreement is workable.
Why?
Because,
why do you suspect it may not work?
You know, RCEP countries themselves, East Asia, enjoys a complete supply chain within themselves. And according to the World Bank data report, East Asia and the Pacific, 55% of the value value in the export by East Asian countries are realized within the region itself. Another 20% realized in the trade between East Asia and Europe. Only 12% realized between East Asia and North America. So North America is not an important, minimal part of the supply
Okay.
chain in East Asia, and while China is the key link. So
All
I
right.
just doubt whether it's workable.
Yeah, Mr. Herman Tiu Laurel, let me give you the floor and try to keep it brief. How high do you look at the chances that the ideologically based and exclusive nature of IPEF will help achieve its intended effects? By the way, China is implied as the disruptor supply chains, and the IPEF is intended to so-called provide another choice for countries in the Indo-Pacific region that's not China.
Well, again, this is one of the means by which the West has been trying to disrupt Asia's rise in the Asian century. But I think it is no problem for RCEP and including the China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. It's no problem for us in Asia to overcome all these other proposals.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks to my guest, Weiwen, Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and Herman Tiu Laurel, President of the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. With that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle Liu Xin in Beijing. On behalf of the whole team, thank you for watching. You've got The Point.